what would be in the beginning point, like the starting point, if you were a small business and like, hey, I really need to understand what SEO is, how it works, why it matters for me. Like, where would you begin to have that discussion with a business that maybe is totally foreign to it?
Well, I think we'd start with talking just about the basic concept, right? Because a lot of people don't really understand what's going on in Google when they go to Google. They're not sure what they're looking at. Maybe they know, but they don't really think about it too hard. So, first we start out, okay, so when you search Google, you get ads and you get website links and you get kind of Google stuff, let's just call it,
Right.
right? So something like Google My Business results might be what we call Google stuff, right?
Yeah.
Just it's not an ad, it's not a link to a website, it's some other thing inside that keeps you inside of Google. And so the ads we don't really talk about, like those are it's straightforward. The website links and the Google stuff is all stuff that you can affect your website or your brand's visibility in through SEO. And so SEO is kind of this kind of art and science of improving your visibility of your brand to potential customers when they're searching for stuff that you might want to offer them, right? And there's a lot of other reasons to SEO
Yeah.
but that when we're talking about in general, most people are like, how do I make money from it? How do I get customers? That
Oh
kind of thing.
yeah. Yeah, for sure.
So, so we'll start with that. There are other things like there's reputation management SEO, like, hey, someone's saying like my restaurant sucks and it ranks #1 in Google. How do we get rid of that? That's a whole other thing.
Oh, right,
But
right,
but it's all related. Um,
right.
so anyhow, so once you kind of explain that to them, then they start to kind of see the matrix a little bit. Oh, I see. And it's like so you don't pay to be there, right? It's like, well, you might pay an SEO person to help you get there, but there's not like a pay $5 a click, right, kind of
Right,
thing.
right.
Um, and so and so the SEO job is to figure out what are all those things that your customers are searching for that might be let's say a conversion event for you. And it could be they want to buy something. They just want to, maybe you want them to hit your website so you can cookie them, so you can show ads to them. Maybe you want them to sign up for your newsletter or whatever it is, right? And so you kind of, there's all these tools and data available that you can use to do research about how people search for stuff. And that's kind of where you start. Like, how do people search for stuff? And then what is Google showing at the top of the results for whatever we decide your customers are searching for? And once we've kind of figured that out, we can say, okay, well, I want to rank for, I don't know, hot dog stand in Chicago. And I can see what Google's showing as the #1 results for that kind of search. And so I can say, okay, well, now what you need is someone to kind of reverse engineer why is that thing showing up at #1 for hot dog stand in Chicago or #2 or whatever. And so what the SEO job is to do is to kind of figure that out at scale. So it's not about one keyword, it's about thousands or maybe millions of keywords that your customers are searching because not everyone searches the same. And try to come up with a viable strategy based on budget and potential and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I just want to follow up to that point real quick because it's like, yeah, you said thousands potentially, right? I mean, and it's a very real
Millions.
thing. Yeah, exactly. So, and depending on your industry, depending on your location, whatever, like there is so much to go after. So
Hmm.
if you're coming in as like a small business, like how would um how would you then prioritize? There's obviously like the, okay, I'm a like you said, hot dog stand. So hot dog stand, like you got it. Maybe that's a good place to start, like,
Yeah,
and
not very
then,
complicated.
right, for sure. So like you have that, but then it's like, okay, what would you say, like as a, just a quick tip, like, would you then take like, okay, hot dog stand location kind of qualifier, or would you hot dog stand near me qualifier? Like where would you then take that keyword to expand it maybe to a longer tail or
Well,
kind of,
in the
yeah.
case of hot dog stand, right? It's
Yeah,
so you have to start to think about, well, that's not just what you are. You're also a lunch place, right? And maybe you're a caterer, right? Like because you do kids parties and
sure.
they like hot dogs.
Yeah.
And so you kind of start to have to think that way. You're not a hot dog stand. You are a hot dog stand, but you're also a lunch place and a caterer and Maybe you're, and so you have to kind of figure out like, what are all these different ways that people are thinking about you, or could think about you,
Right.
and and then it's kind of based on some research. Well, what do people search for the most, or what's most valuable to you? Um, and so in the case of the hot dog stand, it's pretty straightforward. There's not, it's kind of limited, which is good, right? You don't have a lot of
Yeah.
choice.
Right.
But if you were a dentist, well, there's all the services you offer, teeth whitening and that kind of thing, or a med spa, right? There's a billion different services, and so you kind of have to start to think about what your priorities are, just like with everything else in your business. And it's usually going to be the category is the priority, right?
Right.
So dentist or hot dog stand or restaurant maybe, and then everything else is kind of secondary. But most markets are pretty competitive, so it may take you a while and a significant investment to do well for your category. And so thinking about it in a long tail way, well, just to simplify it, like let's say there's 20 keywords that matter. So maybe you don't go after the big ones that are going to be the most competitive. You go after the smaller ones where you can make up, you can move quicker. Um, that's kind of how we'd approach it.
For sure. So like the other part that I'm kind of like curious to kind of get your feedback on is like you obviously have I mean is mostly what we're talking about now like the organic result, right? So like we're
Mhm.
talking about what's happening underneath the ads, underneath the map pack kind of. I mean, because your Google My Business profile obviously is really pushing what's actually happening in the map pack and you're ranking there, right? Is that a correct
Yeah,
take?
but we would start with that too, because that's what's going
Right.
to show up most of the time for a local query. And so you don't want to kind of view your Google My Business page and your website as separate
Right.
things, even though they are separate. It's like all part of the same program. They need to
Right.
work together.
Right. Exactly. So like if you're entering a space and you don't really have any brand equity, you don't really have any time in the market. So you're, and like you said, most things are competitive and only continuing to get more competitive as people get more sophisticated and kind of adopt these tactics.
Hmm.
So like going the long tail makes a lot of sense, but like what if like, you know, part of it is also you really need to be ranking for that keyword, right? You need to be in the mix somehow. In your experience, kind of how do you think the search results, how can you fare? And like, what would be a timeline to expect if you're entering a market like dentists, for instance? What can you think it would take? What do you think it would take to get like decent ranking in those local queries?
It's impossible to say because it's all so case dependent.
Sure.
But in a super competitive market, like you should expect that it's going to take a while, right? But you also might be able to there may be some simple things that you're just not doing that can unlock a lot of value quickly. For example, just making this up, but let's say it is dentist and you're in Chicago uh, and your homepage doesn't say dentist on it for whatever reason. Um, and it doesn't have a neighborhood that you service on it or something. Maybe just adding the word dentist and the neighborhood you service will enable you to rank really well in a 5 mile radius of your office, right? And because you don't really care about all of Chicago, it's too big, and
Right.
you'll maybe someday you'll be number one in when someone just searches Chicago. But what you really care is in your service area, which is probably, I don't know what it's going to be, but let's say it's within 15 miles radius or something is maybe the max someone
Mm-hmm.
might be willing to travel. Um, and so you're really not trying to rank for dentist Chicago. You're trying to rank for when someone puts dentist in Google and Google geo-targets the results based on the user's location, which isn't Chicago, it's some neighborhood in Chicago or some zip code maybe
Right. Right. Right.
or so 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 you can often that kind of thing you can often do pretty well with. And the problem is that okay, now I've won the 2 blocks around my office. Now, what's it going to take to win 5 blocks around my office, right? And keep going out because there's going to be more competition as you go farther away from your office.
Right. Right. Now, I think a question that I have is like, you kind of touched on, you talked about reviews. There's just so much to SEO. It's like hard to kind of like, hey, let's talk about this one because you talk all this stuff just you can go so far into, and there's so many ways to approach all of it. To me, I'm trying to like understand in kind of from you is like, what do you see as like, hey, you're entering a market, or you're established in a market, you maybe have a decent footing. Okay, now like here's the next step. You haven't really put much into SEO. You're ranking for, dentist in whatever. Like, what's the next step to like accelerate? You've got your on-page stuff, and then you've got reviews, and then you've got your Google My Business. You've got all these different pieces. Everything takes time. Everything takes, investment to some degree. Where would you begin to kind of like move the needle to the next step for a business?
So 9 times out of 10, what any website, whether it's an SMB or a Facebook, right? What they need are content and links from other sites. Reviews are good. Definitely get reviews. That can help Google better understand what you should be ranking for. The words in the reviews can help that. But typically when we're working with an SMB, or we actually don't even work with that many SMBs anymore, but typically, like let's say we're working with a 10 location law firm or something. They typically, actually, lawyers is a great example. Lawyer websites like are probably some of the most advanced for SEO. Like they spent the most on SEO over the last decade, let's say. And so they already have a ton of content because they've written like 50 million like how to get out of a DUI articles and stuff. and and usually to move the needle for those guys, what you want to do is, one, they probably have too much content. Google might look at their site as just a bloated, like crappy site. So you want to kind of refine the content to be better targeted. And then what you want to do is get more and better links from other websites. And getting links from other websites is usually like the gas that accelerates this stuff.
Sure. Also, probably one of the most time consuming and challenging, unless like, so tell me, like, there's ways you can kind of buy links essentially, some better quality than others, obviously. So like, there's a lot of talk about like supporting local sponsors or nonprofits, whatever, maybe getting a link back from their sponsors page, whatever. In your eyes, what do you think is like one of the more viable and affordable ways to approach link building?
Well, the easiest way is having a network of people who have websites that you could ask for links from, right? So I would look at, if you're let's say a dentist, I would look at who are all the businesses in my area that I'm partnered with, that I have a relationship with, and can I get stuff, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then what are the typical things I'm doing that might be able to generate links? So am I donating to charities? Do I have a booth at street fairs or whatever? Like all those things, all those entities have websites. And so those would be people you could ask for links. And then after that, there's a bunch of obvious places you can go, like, hey, do you have all your social profiles filled out, right? Those are all will link to you and can help you. Are you a member of any other organizations like the Association of Dentists or whatever? And like, those are all places that can link to you, right? Typically, you exhaust that list pretty quickly, right? Because the business doesn't really want to do it, or they do it. They got 3 links. Great. Okay, now what? Right?
Yeah, right.
So those are all the kind of cheap, easy things to get. After that, it's like any other marketing channel. You have to have a program and a process to go out and get links and figure out a good reason why anyone would link to you. Mm-hmm. And there are plenty of SEO companies that will sell you links. You don't want those. You don't want anyone who's going to sell you a link. Anyone's like, oh, a link is X dollars, and they're like opening their trench coat. They're like, which?
It's that easy.
Yeah, some of those actually will work. There's a lot of spammy links that work. The problem is you don't know which ones will and which ones won't, and you don't know which ones will come back to haunt you. One of the things you mentioned was local sponsorship link building. We actually used to do that, and it was pretty easy to get, right? You're like, hey, I'll give you $50 for this, and we'll sponsor your turkey run, right? And just link back to this lawyer or whatever. And so that was easy. But what we figured out with those sponsorship links is, one, everyone started doing them.
Yep.
Because it was easy. And two, those sponsorship those websites tend to get updated every year, and they with new sponsorships, and you lose the old links.
Yeah.
So it's basically like you're renting links,
Right. Right.
and we didn't think that was an ethical thing to sell to clients, like a temporary link.
Yeah. Yeah.
And and so we built our own capabilities to essentially go out and get links. And you could read, there's probably a million articles on the web about this. It's really straightforward, right? Come up with a reason that someone should link to you, like create a piece of content,
Sure.
let's say, like best, like how about this, like the worst dental disasters, right? Let's say, here's my photo gallery of the worst dental disasters. And then, and then have a process to find hundreds, maybe thousands of websites that are relevant to dentists or Chicago or wherever you live, and then come up with an email campaign to target them. And that means like sending out emails, being like, hey, like I have this dental disasters page. I think it would really fit in well with you. Oh, and I've even created a version for you guys. You can put it on your site, right? And do that over and over again and keep iterating, improving your messaging until you can see it reliably converting. And it's like a direct response game. You have to send out 100 emails to get one link, right? And then you have to keep doing it over and over again.
Play the numbers game. Yeah.
Yeah. And so you need a process to do that. No SMB wants to do that. So that's where you start to say, maybe there's someone who does this for a living that I can use, because it sounds weird to me to even try to do that, right?
Right. Right.
And that's when you get involved with an SEO professional and be like, okay, like I don't care what, I don't even want to know what you're doing. I trust you, right? Just go do it, right?
Right. Do you think, and just to go back to this link you mentioned, kind of like organizations or groups near you, like is there more value to a link to another site that is that maybe shares the location keywords that you share on your site? Is there more value to that link than some company across the country that's posting?
Yeah, I think it's always really hard to measure value, because at the end of the day, who really knows what one is worth over the other, right? The way we look at it is, does this URL, not the domain, does this URL rank for the keywords that we want to rank for, or a keyword that we want to rank for? Does it? And if it does, it's relevant, right?
Yeah.
Right. Or at least Google thinks it's relevant, right?
Right.
So that's kind of the major criteria. Is it ranking for a query that we think is relevant? And then is the traffic to that site, as best we can tell, going up or down? You don't want links from a site where the traffic's going down, because there's a good chance that Google has penalized that site.
Okay. Very interesting.
And so you can use like tools like SEMrush or Ahrefs or any of these things that publicly report on website traffic estimates.
Right. So you also talked a little bit about content, and I saw one of your posts, you were talking about like, good content, like you don't just say make good content. It's not that easy. Like, and I thought it was, what was your metaphor? Or how did you say
it's
it?
like asking someone who's hungry, like, oh, eat food.
Right. Exactly. Like you can't just say, yeah, you need good content. Then, okay, it's done, but
it's the easiest thing that SEO people say. Yeah. Make your content better. Right.
Right. So what does that mean? Good content. Obviously it's not easy, but what could it look like from a small business perspective?
So the stock answer is write content that someone would want to read, and that's going to vary based on your topic, but make it good first, right? That would be the ask. 90% of people can't do that, but that's the ask, right? Start with making it good. Use research to decide what to write about. So again, look at what Google is understand the queries your customers are doing, and look at what Google is rewarding in those queries. As an example, we had a client who was in the skincare business. They had like, let's say, moisturizer, face moisturizer. And so they were like, why doesn't we have the best face moisturizer in the world? Why don't we rank #1 for face moisturizer? And if you look, probably is this way today, if you search face moisturizer in Google, probably the first result is like our reviews of the top 10 face moisturizers, right?
Like a referral, network or something. kind of.
No, like Marie Claire or some,
Oh, okay. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
some some skincare magazine or
Right, right,
beauty magazine or something.
right.
And so in that case, you have to kind of change your thinking. If you want to rank number one for face moisturizer, you probably have to consider writing editorial about face moisturizer, not
Right.
just having a great product in a product page. Um, so you have to look at what's working in Google, and then you have to research, okay, what does Google seem to be rewarding for queries with this intent? Meaning, it's not just the first result, it's the first, let's say, 50 results. What do all these pages have in common that we can kind of pick apart? Like,
Right.
do they all use the word moisturizer in the title, right? Or something like that? Or do they all have an image or a video or what is it? And then you need to take that data and turn it into an SEO brief that a writer can use to create content that starts with an SEO as its foundation.
So you kind of started touching on like types of content a little bit in what you were just saying, kind of like maybe there's a video, maybe there's this, there's that. Like if you were to look at types of, and you talked about editorial content as well.
Yeah.
If you were to like look at all these different types, you have blogs, you have long form video, reviews, social, guest posting, you have all these types of content. Is there uh, uh, a certain type of content that you find is really the most valuable when it comes to boosting your ranking for a certain keyword? Is it a mixture of everything? Is it combining them all and connecting them all? What in the form, like the actual form of the content, do you see as being like the most valuable?
Well, like I said, it's totally contextually dependent on the keyword. In most cases, text is your best bet. But there's certain keywords that will only generate videos, like movie name plus trailer. Text isn't going to help you.
Right,
It's
right,
going to be the trailer, right?
right,
So again, but even when you do video, you should be publishing a transcript of the video, which is text that a search engine can grab onto.
yep. You have your kind of foundational SEO aspects, for a small business, your Google My Business, your on page, obviously the keyword research in advance of all of that. But then you get into like more of the technical optimizations, page speed, search console errors, like all that stuff, which is like really kind of time consuming. And I personally am super frustrated by it just when I come into
Right.
like dynamic shifts and all this stuff.
Yep.
Like,
Yep. Yep.
so anyway, the point being, how does a small business get from, hey, I got to Google My Business profile to, hey, my website is like, has no errors on search console and the page speeds are really great. How do you get to that from a budget
So there's no such thing as no errors. Don't stress out about it.
Right.
Most small business websites, 9 times out of 10, technical SEO problems is not their issue. So of course you want your pages to be fast. So whoever built your site for them, be like, why isn't my page faster? Make it faster, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's the best you're gonna do. Certainly, if half of your site is serving an error and is broken, well, fix your site, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
But don't worry about every last little thing in Google Search Console. It's not your concern. That stuff is mostly for like, I have 10 million URLs and complicated website and like I need help figuring out what's going on.
Right.
A
Right.
10-page website is not usually a technical SEO problem.
Right. Right. All right. Well, that's perfect. Yeah. No, I really appreciate you spending some time with me. Thank you so much.
No problem, Joe. Happy to.